Okay. Thomas Kyle, Vice Chair and Acting Chair, call the Virtual Construction Industry Energy Board meeting of February 9th, 2021 to order at 9:30 a.m. Melissa, would you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Chair Jay Hansen, excused. Vice Chair, Acting Chair, Thomas Kyle.
Here.
Travis Argue.
Here.
Walter Cottle. Walt Cottle.
Here.
John Camiller.
Here.
Gary Heikkinen.
Here.
Heather Miller.
Here.
Matt Roselle. Matthew Roselle. He was here, Mr. Chair, so we'll come back to him. Blake Shalide.
Blake Shalide is here.
Eli Volam.
Here.
Kale Zuschlag.
Here.
And we'll come back to Matt Roselle. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Is acting chair, is there any changes to the agenda? In that case, I Vice Chair rule that the agenda and order business is approved. Do you have any changes to the minutes that were sent out prior? As chair, I rule that the draft minutes of October 20, 2020 were final. Next meeting date is March 16th, 2021, combined with the Residential and Manufacturer Structures Board. Okay, the following dates for the 2021 meetings are March 16th, June 8th, and October 19th. Tyler Glaze, you have anything on public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Tyler Glaze. I'm a policy analyst for the division. We do not have any general public comments, Mr. Chair, but I believe we have several items of comment that either written or public comment that we've received for the various agenda items. So if you care to, we can address those when the time comes.
Okay, thank you. Just the next on agenda is item 3, Mark Heizer, residential reach code item. Would you care an update?
Thank you, Chair Kyle. For the record, Mark Heizer with the division. Thank you, Acting Chair Kyle and members. What we wanted to go through today was give an update on what is happening excuse me, with the Oregon residential reach code process. We had sent out requests for proposals at the Oregon. You have a link to the Oregon Building Codes Division website, residential reach code or reach code page. You'll see that we received a lot of ideas for where stakeholders would like to see the reach code go. Of course, this is set out under Senate Bill 79. It's sort of a above and beyond optional code that any jurisdiction would look to be able to accept without having to go through special process. What came out of meetings where we took open public comment, both at meetings hosted by the division and Oregon Department of Energy. They also helped host comment sessions. We did additional outreach to the stakeholders and posted to the Reach Code website is now a general draft that has a general prescriptive path, which is sort of a new above code version that would replace Chapter 11 of the residential code. This new REACH code would have some of the highlights of what are on there is under the prescriptive wall construction would be going from R21 intermediate framing to a requirement for R23 advanced framing. So that puts the walls at 24 inches on center with a heavier, better performing insulation in the cavity. In addition, the additional measures table had some modifications, and the requirement is now for, instead of one additional measure, it would be for 3 additional measures. In addition, there is we need to update the performance path. We're looking at bringing in what is currently in the International Residential Code and the IECC Energy Code, a performance path that is called an Energy Rating Index version. We're looking to do equivalent to what is in the prescriptive path. This is really doing a HERS rating, REM rate performance for homes. It's very popular in other states. It's starting to become more of a standard for how alternative methods are done in many states. We are still currently working out a few more details on solar ready and the electric vehicle ready portions of this. We've been doing some outreach to members of the electrical board and contractors, as well as we've received additional input from the incentive programs, Energy Trust of Oregon, to try and make sure that we get that in this above code program, that there's a good solution for alignment with the incentives. So some of that language is still being worked out. So there is currently a draft posted. We are quite confident that this will exceed the requirements of Executive Order 1720. So homes built to this program will probably exceed what is needed for meeting Executive Order 1720, which is the equivalent energy performance of the Zero Energy Ready Home program. So probably somewhere in the range of 10 to 15% above the 2021, and some of the analysis is relative to the 2017 residential code. So that is available for review. We're still working on a final. We're looking to bring that back in a final form to the combination meeting of the this board along with the Oregon Residential and Manufacturers Structures Board, so the residential board and the C board together to look at this, what we would propose as the final version of the 2021 residential REACH code. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Division's here to take questions, and I want to turn it back over to the policy staff. Thank you.
If there's any questions from the members. Tyler, do you have some comments on the public testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, members of the board, Tyler Glaze, policy analyst for the division. I believe we have one matter of public testimony from Mr. Kevin Duell, excuse me if I mispronounce your last name, from Northwest Natural. And Mr. Chair, feel free to allot him whatever time you see fit.
Right, we will allow him 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Kyle, and to the board and the division. I appreciate this opportunity to testify and wanted to just first of all point out some aspects of this. First of all, Kevin Duell with Northwest Natural. Wanted to point out some aspects of this REACH code that we definitely support. One is that we're supporting asking for 3 measures from the additional measure table, specifying a vertical drain water heat recovery unit, and specifying heat exchanger performance in measure 8. And then elsewhere in the code, the REACH code, we appreciate the air and duct leakage testing, the we stand measures for plumbing and hot water savings in particular, and the addition of that energy rating index with an optional renewable energy adjustment. I do have a question about the table, in particular footnote C, which refers to measure 6. It says that measures 3 and 4 may not be combined for compliance. And I would suggest that should say measures 3, 4, and 6 cannot be combined. It makes sense to me that 3 and 4 could be combined, but not that those 3, since they would be mutually exclusive. And then also, would like to recommend that measure 1 or measure 2 be required in the choice of 3 measures. In particular, measure 2, which is about high efficiency water heating, because it's independent of the building envelope, it would lock in savings that are occupant driven. And that would be great to see. Also, a recommendation for measure 2, which again is the water heating. I would recommend adding a tier 3 requirement for an electric heat pump water heater that's installed in conditioned space. A tier 3 water heater requires ducting, and that would be appropriate in that application where it would otherwise pull heat from the conditioned space and potentially tax the existing heating system. And with that, I am complete. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Tyler, that we need to deal with?
Mr. Chair, not that I'm aware of. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go on to item 6, new business. Mark, you wanted to speak at this?
Thank you, Chair Kyle. For the record, again, Mark Heizer with the division. The meeting today is to discuss something that's been on the horizon for this group for a little while. That is a mid-cycle update of the energy provisions to the commercial code using ASHRAE 90.1 2019 to take the place of ASHRAE 90.1 2016. As you know, we've had a bit of time here through when Administrator Long was here. The background for what we're looking at today is really tying back to Executive Order 17-20. And by 2022, we were to have the Oregon Energy Code for commercial structures equivalent to 90.1, the International Energy Conservation Code, and the energy provisions of the International Standard 189.1, the International Green Construction Code. At the time of the executive order, this needed to be done, of course, by October of next year. To avoid coming back again next fall, to meet the executive order with with a good safety factor, bringing in 90.1 2019 will meet that. As part of this, again, on the background of how we wound up with 90.1, sort of coming out of that executive order, the division and the administrator determined that we would look to have the commercial code going to the use of 90.1. It came out with faster adoption and earlier adoption 2 years before the International Energy Conservation Code, which is sort of what we had based on in previous editions of the Oregon Energy Efficiency Specialty Code. Part of the reasoning of that was for their open ANSI process. Again, it was done earlier. We can get a better code adopted earlier and faster. The ASHRAE process has built-in cost effectiveness review. There are multiple subcommittees, whether lighting, mechanical, envelope, energy modeling. They do a continuous review of updates from 90.1 2016 to 90.1 2019. There is a really substantive feedback process whereby every proposal gets a chance for public feedback, continuing review before it is finally voted on for inclusion in the standard. It has a spread out period, whereas when we look at the IECC, that's adoption happens really in a 1 week period. Along with this, we get of course, the compliance tools from the U.S. Department of Energy. Another piece of this is, of course, alignment with the latest Executive Order 20-04, which is requiring that we get a 60% reduction of regulated energy use relative to our code in place in 2006, which was the 2004 Oregon Energy Code. So that's another piece, and we are lucky that because of looking to that era and our 2004 code, we're going to get a little benefit from the move to 90.1 as well. I'll go into that a little more later. The ASHRAE 90.1 committee, relative to that reduction, 60% reduction over our 2004 code, they are looking to probably exceed our 60% target. Through the 2028 code, they should be at or beyond where that's their plan is currently to get to that. So we've got a process that we can work with through the ASHRAE. They are really looking to probably meet or exceed our goals here in Oregon. We also get alignment with, once again, the Architecture 2030's program, and we've already brought in a little piece of their program. Senate Bill 79 asked us to align with their goals from the Architecture 2030, and we're asking people to put in a zero code calculator still that started for new buildings in the 2019 Oregon Energy Code with the forms that we were looking for, and looking to continue that. Part of this is point is to start raising awareness of renewables, because that is an important piece, but a lot of renewable regulation is outside of BCD authority. Again, what we made the promise for when we went with 90.1 was to adopt the next version as quickly as possible after the release of the newest 90.1. With 90.1 2019, once we knew we had a working COM check available, we began the process. We looked at bringing in pieces to integrate the administrative and enforcement language into the structural code, same as we did in the first version of adoption of 90.1 2016. Making sure that we're consistent language, that we make sure we don't get into problems with planning, zoning, and so forth. That's that administrative part that we always have to make sure with any energy code. We do the same thing when we looked at adoption of the IECC of their Chapter 1. So this cycle, we're bringing in early, more or less as a mid-cycle adoption, to look at 90.1 2019. When it comes to looking at 90.1 2022, which they are already working on at ASHRAE, some addenda are already coming in. We're hoping to bring into this committee just sort of some of the changes that are in progress ahead of time, so that you know what's being changed in the what would be in 90.1 2022. So you'll have a little more time instead of dropping all of this at one point. But that's part of our promise was to bring 90.1 2019 as quickly as possible. We're already, we have received official feedback that this wasn't fast enough. But next cycle, we will have more time for consideration. One other piece I wanted to note is, just like the residential code, when they came in with the new ORSC, not only energy, but all of the provisions, they went with a longer grace period, and we are definitely looking to do that this time around. Is we are going to be proposing a 6-month instead of a 3-month grace period to give people time to look this over, and also to give us time for outreach to people and to get our training done for building officials. One thing I wanted to point out, and I'll see about doing some screen share, if I can get permission, we will.
Yes, that would
Is
be
that
fine.
correct? Excuse me, Chair. Come.
I said that would be fine.
Okay.
Let's be doing it
Just
already.
wanted to show that Again, there is a ComCheck compliance software that is available. What our ComCheck used to look like, there was can't get this to show much bigger, but this is the old version where we had a 2014 Oregon Energy Efficiency Specialty Code. It had a requirements tab for each of the portions, whether it was envelope, lighting, or mechanical. Oregon was actually, I believe, for our 2010, we were one of the first states to actually get a request for sort of requirement, a publication check sheet. And today, this is what ComCheck looks like in the online version. We have 90.1 2019 as the code. One thing that is missing now is our 2014 version. That is no longer available. Again, when you get to things like the requirements page, this is a great check sheet for building officials to go through to see where on the plans and specs information will be located. So this is a great compliance tool. Again, as part of our promise on this, we would make it so that we didn't have to do major updates to ComCheck or ask for an Oregon specific version. We'll get into a little bit later. We will have, the division will be creating a supplemental sheet for the few items that we are looking to update for Oregon. But one piece before we get into this, and want to really thank people from Department of Energy who are online today, is, oh goodness, you'll have to forgive me, you're going to see a little bit of popping up here. I meant to be at the beginning and can't get to my, part of the reason why use of 90.1 for us is a really good move is all of the additional work that's done by Pacific Northwest National Laboratory through contract with the U.S. Department of Energy. During the ASHRAE adoption process, they are always keeping track of, they're the official scorekeeper for how 90.1 changes. And what they have, this, at the end of every cycle, they give a progress indicator, and there's some mandatory reports that will be coming out, but the progress indicator that they put out sort of tracks 90.1 relative to the previous version. And they also track relative to, if you see, if you can see it on the screen, they look relative to 90.1 2004. And they give an update for each new version where the latest 90.1 is relative to 90.1 2004. And that gives a good reflection of where 90.1 2019 is relative to the Oregon's 2004 code. They show that if we move to 90.1 2019, there's a 40 to 45% improvement over 90.1 2004. And that is whole building energy use. So when you look at the regulated energy use, it's actually much better than that. It's a way of tracking how we are meeting the executive order 20-04 toward that 60% reduction. So the U.S. Department of Energy is helping us keep track of that information. This shows what they go through. They have 16 different prototype buildings, and I believe they're adding a few new ones. I'll may give a chance for Mike Rosenberg to speak to that later. He's with us today. He runs the group that takes part in this. But these are the 16 building prototypes. I don't know if the screen is big enough to show this, but they have 3 different office styles: warehouse, strip malls, retail, standalone retail. They look at 2 different primary and secondary schools, outpatient healthcare hospitals, 2 different hotel sizes, quick service restaurant, full service restaurant, low and or mid-rise and high-rise apartments. So they take They do models and see how, as ASHRAE improves, how these are looking. As a quick side note, just wanted to note that with 90.1 2019, the small office, these single-story buildings that have enough roof space, if they have adequate roof area, small office, warehouse, strip mall retail, standalone retail, and with newer panels, both the primary school and secondary school, could offset their annual energy use if net metered with on-site renewables, if you have a good source. So 90.1 is moving forward quite well. Some of the buildings can get to zero. Others, such as restaurants, and the taller the building and the less roof area you have to offset the load of the building, it's going to be a little harder for those to do it. Some will never be able to make it to net zero with on-site renewables. So again, they look at our climate zones. You can barely see Oregon. We currently have climate zones 4C and 5B. They then do major reports where they look at not only cost savings, but do a final determination, which they are part of federal rulemaking for how much the new version improved. They do a lot of weighting based on each climate zone, look at recent databases of how buildings are distributed out. They then weight the results and look at not only that, they have special, just to go through this really quickly, they have special modeling programs for each year. As their modeling software gets updated, they know how the modeling software changed. They look at certain pieces of the models, document what they did to update them. But one thing I wanted to point out is they keep track of all the addenda. So during those 3 years of the modifications to 90.1 2016, there were 88 addenda. Of them, only 29 were actually relative to true energy savings. As a member of ASHRAE, yes, we're geeks. We like to do a lot of work and really make sure that we're accurate in our language. So there were a lot of things that had 88 different changes, but some of them were just required for making updates in how you model buildings, clarifications that we find over time to make the language more understandable. Some things aren't included because some of the equipment efficiency tables, due to some other reasons, won't be in effect at the time of, and they're sort of showing where equipment efficiency will be after 2019 is in effect and actually going to 90.1 2022. They give where some things weren't included in progress indicators, some pieces, but here are the major 29 pieces. We're going to go through a quick look later, but wanted to show really on the results, they have national weighted averages of the results relative to 2016. They break things out by building type and the relative to 2004, but I'm going to go to the end just real quick. Don't want to bore everybody here, but I do want to thank all the people at PNNL, Mike Rosenberg and his staff and also Jeremiah Williams, who's the program manager for the Energy Codes program, and Reed Hart, who we've worked with, a lot of this staff is located either in Portland or Eugene area. It's really great to have that locally available. But I did want to point out that 90.1 2016, when averaged over climate zone 4C, is 6.4% better on energy savings. It's a 6.4% reduction, which is better than the national weighted average of 5%. Climate zone 5B, which will include on the other side of the mountains, had a 5.5% improvement. Just wanted to point out that for our climate zones, we saw the difference between 90.1 2016 and 2019. Oregon winds up being better in that category. So would like to go to So I'm going to have to get to a different, or I'm trying to find my matrix sheet that I was going to. So have the matrix of, to go through, first off, some of the changes that are before you today. You will see in your packet, there is a list of the actual written comments. Let me go to that first. Forgive me, I'm going to go down to, oops. Well, you have written language that has the modifications to the administrative, but when we go to the tables and look at some of the major items that have some cost impact and where things changed and things we felt we should bring up to the committee here today. The first one is about fenestration. One of the big changes that happened was in past versions of 90.1, you had different thermal requirements for windows with and door fenestration with metal frames, and then the U factor and performance requirements for fenestration with non-metal frames. ASHRAE has finally moved to all fenestration is in the same category. One thing I want to point out is that the PNNL has and U.S. Department of Energy have already developed training PowerPoint presentations, and this is the slide that they have for fenestration. It's showing the old table in the bottom left corner had fenestration by non-metal, all metal framing fixed, metal framing operable, and metal framing entrance doors. We have now moved in 90.1 2019 to fixed, operable, and entrance door, regardless of the frame type. The major effect for Oregon climate zones will be that fixed metal will need to be a little bit better performing than under 90.1 2016. If entrance doors will be improved just slightly, but if it's operable fenestration, no increase in stringency for metal windows that are operable. If you're a fiberglass, wood, or vinyl frame window, which we see a lot of in residential occupancies, they get a lot better credit for that piece. Next biggest issue is building air leakage. The requirement for a continuous air barrier is being updated, that all buildings will need to have the blower door test for the building. This is what is also in the IECC coming up. There's no getting around that this time, except for there is an exception in the building air leakage requirements when there's a specialized, essentially air sealing design and field verification under section 5.9.1. The division is going to need to come up with some forms to make sure that the building officials can verify that if people take that exception. Under vestibules, something that's been in the Oregon code for a while, they did add the exception that it was in our 2014 code and went into the 2018 IECC that if you have an air curtain at your vestibule or an air curtain, that can be installed in lieu of a vestibule. Another piece that came in that had been out there for some time was they were bringing in a compliance path for using ASHRAE standard 90.4 for data centers. This is something that we've been following for some time. BCD is putting forward a modification to that, since that's relative, and we'll bring this up. We'll come up with that in a later portion of the matrix, but that ties back to Executive Order 17-20, where the division was asked to look at high use energy use buildings. And as we know, we've got a lot of really big data centers in the state that use more power than most small towns. Item number 5 is about pump efficiency. There's some new standards that have been brought into the code looking at increased efficiency and including some of the more pump efficiency in the design of buildings. One big item is the equipment efficiency table. So when you're doing HVAC in Chapter 6, the efficiency tables for equipment have expanded, been modified some, and it's helping us at the division and designers and building officials a lot because they're expanding the types of equipment that are covered. Not long ago, people would come in with different computer room HVAC equipment, and it was a very square peg that wouldn't fit into the code's round hole. They have done enough expansion to really help with new equipment types. The variable refrigerant slash more commonly known, the smaller mini split systems are now covered with their own individual tables because they do function differently. One piece that we noted when we brought in 90.1 2016 is that there would be a new that 90.1 2016 would have a very short-lived use of fan efficiency index, FEI. The new efficiency metric is built into some federal rulemaking, is now called the FEG, fan efficiency grade. Pretty easy to do. I went out and checked today just to make sure that it could be done and that the went to one manufacturer's automated website for fan selection. I'm trying to find, but found out that yes, their program can print out the, automatically when you go in and you select a fan, it will automatically give you your fan efficiency grade requirement. The requirement is for a FEG of 1 or greater. Really, before the part of 90.1 is that when it gets into this code, it's already been worked out with the manufacturers. They were already at the table. They had their chance to put in their comments and make sure that their equipment could be covered. Item 8 is probably one of the bigger ones, is about dwelling unit heat recovery. Apartments will need to have heat recovery. There will be since it is under a 6.5, it can be traded off. But for Oregon's climate zones, dwelling units would sort of start out as baseline, requiring heat recovery units for dwelling units. This is something that's coming inevitably to most, even to the IECC. So that's one of the biggest impacts is for apartment construction, but there is an ability to trade that off with energy modeling. Item 9, the lighting designers, once again, are getting their allowed lighting really tightened up. During the process, prior to 2019, the lighting subcommittee went through and adjusted the figures for really every table being able to be met with the current LED lighting technology. They continue to have additional allowances for room geometry, so you get a little extra lighting in ASHRAE if the room is really tall and skinny. The important part about this is that LED lighting, again, is since this addendum was added to 90.1, fixtures are getting even more efficient and the light they can put out per watt. So expect changes in the 2022 possibly for lighting power allowances. One other piece that came in that would be good to tell people about is a simplified building compliance path. For HVAC in section 6, there are sort of a simplified building compliance path for buildings under 25,000 square feet. They brought in a similar path for lighting compliance so that office, retail, and school occupancies, where at least 80% of the floor area is one of those occupancies, you can use this new simplified path. It's sort of giving this, avoiding some of the really detailed, complex stuff that in the code in 90.1 that's intended for much more complex, larger structures. One other piece is under daylight control. When you're in a daylight zone, there's a requirement, of course, for adjusting the amount of light. It used to be allowed to have step control. In other words, you could turn off half the bulbs or find another way to do reduction. With changes in controls and outputs and the fact that LED fixtures can now handle dimming, we have moved the 90.1 move to continuous dimming requirements for daylight zones so that people don't see that really quick bam on and off when it triggers. So it's a little bit less distracting for the occupants as well. Parking garage control, automatic control for lighting in parking garages was updated with a new control period. The scope of the detection for motion detection in parking garages was updated some. Item 13 is clarification to exceptions for when we do look at daylight areas. They wanted to make sure that their allowances when you have another building or obstruction nearby, they've done a clarification on that, which will help us with enforcement and our training on daylighting areas. So those are what came out of 90.1 committee. All of those pieces went through a scalar or economic analysis to make sure that it met their standards for payback, went through public process review, looked at them in detail. Here we have 5 items, or actually 6, that we're looking to bring in from division standpoint. The first one has to do with standard 90.4, which came in to 90.1. There was a missing reference to what year of standard 90.4 the data center the energy standard for data centers would be in effect. We've made it, we are adding in that it's 90.4 2019, which is more stringent than 90.4 2016 to make sure that we capture those savings. And in addition, we brought in 90.1 has definitions for what is a data center that falls under 90.4, or excuse me, a computer room that falls under 90.4. We're updating the definitions to align both 90.4, which is their definition of data center, versus computer room. Computer rooms are really spaces that have under, I believe it's 10 kW of connected load for the data equipment. So the definitions really are just aligning of the two standards. But the one piece that we're doing is if it's a new building where the owner and designers have a choice to comply with 90.4, we are making that new buildings do need to use standard 90.4 2019. That means that it's in chapter 8.2.1, that has to do with the distribution of the equipment and efficiency on that when it comes to the UPS and the power distribution units and the power going to the equipment. And also under the HVAC section, that if you're in, that they have a methodology, because data centers aren't your normal economizer operation. That was a lot of the reason for developing 90.4. You comply with the HVAC portion as well. The second piece we are looking at is, of course, we've changed the scope. When it comes to dwelling units, any building constructed under the 2019 Oregon Structural Specialty Code needs to comply with Chapter 13, which would become 90.1 2019. We're just clarifying that no going back to the residential code and creating those confusions. If you're a 2-story residential over commercial, you're in the commercial code. If you're in a 3-story apartment, you're in the commercial code for your structure. We are building to that as well. I believe Tyler will bring up a little more on that, since this does affect some pieces under the RMSB. We would look to have the both RMSB members to approve the code under the rules of the Construction Industry Energy Board. The next 3 items are pieces that we brought in from, and one other piece about the dwelling unit lighting. The current 90.1 says 75, they don't count the dwelling unit lighting in your whole building lighting compliance. We have changed that level from not 75% to 100%, because the efficacy levels will still allow some, pretty much any LED and a lot of fluorescent fixtures would still comply under this. There is still the exception for dwelling units if the lighting is controlled by a dimmer or other automatic control, that you don't have to use LED fixtures. So that's a little bit of it's not as stringent as our residential code, but that is allowed. We brought forward radiant spot heating from our 2014 OESC. It's to allow limited spot heating in enclosed spaces without triggering the envelope requirements. This is for things like, say, a ODOT garage or a loading dock where you have a loading dock supervisor, receiving supervisor, and they need some heat. It's allowance for that we had in our 2014 code to have limited spot heating of 500 square feet, or I believe 10% of the floor area is allowed to be covered. It has to be a spot where there is a worker, not for heating up equipment, and it has to be on automatic control. So actually the controls are tighter than what would be needed for exterior radiant heating under 90.1. It has to be either, like in our current like under the 2014 code, either on a twist timer or an occupancy sensor, or you have to choose to turn that equipment on. Also from our old 2014 code, this did not go into our 2019, but we had a requirement that for packaged units and small split systems, that the first day, if they had over 6 kilowatts of electric heating as their source of heating, that the equipment needed to be a heat pump. We've modified the language a little bit due to conflicts and pieces we found out from the 2014 language, but we want to bring this back again, is that limiting it to units under 20 tons of cooling capacity and as new construction. We have found out that, unfortunately, when you're replacing a rooftop unit, sometimes that equipment, when you move it to a heat pump, it does change the breaker size. So people were going to have to rewire, or people might have replaced the units without looking into that and potentially created a electrical hazard. So it is just for new construction this time. One other item is, out of some requests from some stakeholders and looking at vestibule compliance, since it is mandatory, and there are going to be some conditions where in smaller construction, say on the 5,500 square foot office, we're providing an optional compliance path. Since buildings are being tested for air leakage, if the building is tested and winds up with a 25% lower than code minimum air leakage, which is pretty significant, we found that based on the original data used for putting, or some of the research for vestibules, it would actually save more on infiltration on the building than a vestibule. So buildings under 25,000 square feet can have an option to not have vestibules if they go to a lower blower door test level by 25%. The last one is relative to controlled receptacles. There's both the IECC and 90.1 are now requiring mandatory control of receptacles in spaces. There had been a proposal to 90.1 of potentially having an option for this. There's no way to do energy modeling to get out of this. We're looking at having a simplified path where if your overall building envelope performance is better, your lighting performance is 10% better, or if you're doing an energy model, you can use that as an alternate to controlled receptacles. With that, the division is looking to make, excuse me, make this a simplified, fast adoption. We're trying to rely on the research that was done by the Department of Energy and ASHRAE through this. And of course, we all knew that this was coming. We'd have to get this adopted to meet both promises that we made for faster adoption and for also meeting Executive Order 1720. I'd be open, the division is open for taking any questions at this point. Sorry about the big long display, but just wanted to give everybody background to sort of recap where we were, why we're here, why you're seeing 90.1 2019 today to get things moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I saw that Aaron has a question about some part of the code. Aaron?
Hello. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Aaron Gunsner, AMCA International, Air Movement and Control Association International. Mark, I have a question on number 7, please. Would it be possible to show your screen again with that document? Thank you, Mark. So I guess I might have seen incorrectly. I just wanted to make a clarification, I suppose. To me, how it's written there, I believe, is backwards. FEI, Fan Energy Index, is the new metric that's replacing FEG, Fan Efficiency Grade. So FEI is the metric that is in ASHRAE 90.1 2019.
Thank you for the clarification on that. I just, okay.
Certainly. That's just been, one of my organization's main driving points as the new fan metric. So just wanted to make sure and set the record straight for the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Eli Volum, through the chair. I'd just like to first off say thanks, Mark, for the presentation. And just in general, I'm glad to see we're following the plan that was laid out when we moved to ASHRAE 90.1. If you recall, last time there was a lot of public comments and concern that we weren't going to be adopting the most recent versions as they came out. And as we're seeing, we're doing exactly as was outlined to us. So no surprises there, and glad to see we're sticking with the trajectory that we all were in alignment on when we moved to ASHRAE 90.1. I'd just like to recognize that we had that public comment submitted in writing, and I guess Mark, you touched on it a little bit, that there's the recommendation for the 6-month lag period before compliance is required. And I guess I'm curious about a training plan to educate industry about changes. And then just the second part about Mr. Burns' comments about getting the paperwork cleaner. I wonder if there's any opportunities to review the paperwork requirements and make sure that it is efficient and that we're not adding soft costs to the industry by making requirements that don't necessarily deliver value. So just the two questions about training options and just the overall paperwork process.
Through the chair, Mark Heizer with Division. First off, about yes, the 6-month allowance. This is going to give more time to, everybody's, many groups are still catching up with sort of the new look of using the 90.1 book versus the old IECC based energy code. A lot more language in there that gets into more detail, especially mechanically. I'll blame my peeps on that one. Just more language, but as far as training, of course, the division is working on, and once we know we're done with this, we'll be going directly into additional training for starting for the building officials. And one piece of this will be going through, we've had some recommendations for developing for the building officials. And our training staff is looking at this on how to do better training from the point of plan check and building inspection. We're having a lot of requests for that. We fortunately, again, as I noted, there are already some training slides put together by PNNL. We are looking, of course, we will have more specific training for our building officials on 90.1 relative to Oregon as we go through building official training. So, and in the past, because we were doing in-person training for building officials and we had limited space, the general public wasn't able to attend. Maybe one thing that is coming out of our current pandemic situation is that we're going to remote training, and this will be available for anyone to see. So what we're training the building officials, anyone will be able to see. In addition, we'll probably be, well, we're definitely looking to work with our partners, both at NIA and elsewhere in the state, to do further outreach, both to builders and to outreach to the AIA and architecture community, outreach to ASHRAE for the HVAC designers, to the plumbers, and to the lighting designers in the state, trying to get additional information to them and do further outreach and sort of pointing them not only to our training, but also to the additional great work that the folks at U.S. Department of Energy have put together. As far as soft costs, we're trying, part of this is making it a little easier on not having, we have free compliant software available for everyone, which has been an important part of this move. There will be very limited additional pieces that go in for new construction. Of course, on that, we've said we want people to know about the zero code and knowing about the alignment with Architecture 2030. It takes about 5 minutes for that extra soft cost piece to be done. So we're going to keep it to fairly limited. If you're using ComCheck, we've been doing this since 2010. It's the program is getting much more intelligent, shall we say. It's doing a lot more building simulation in the background to allow for you to do trade-offs. But when it comes to soft costs, through the chair to Member Volum, what additional soft costs would be of concern at this point?
Yeah, I was really just kind of asking as a question to the point that was communicated in the letter. Just the recommendation was to get the paperwork cleaner, and so I guess that's just I feel like you addressed some of that directly, and it's a pretty vague comment that was submitted. So I appreciate the discussion that you provided, and I guess I just throw it out there to other board members to see if anyone has any concerns or thoughts from their personal experience or from talking with the community. So Mark, I'm satisfied with your answer. I appreciate the response, and I'll leave it there.
Mark, there's also a question on the chat board from Tom Young. What is proposed to happen to SAM 19-01? Will it remain an option?
Through the chair, Mark Heizer with the division. The intent is SAM 1901 for the use of the 2018 IECC will go away at the end of the 6-month grace period. IECC 2018 will be significantly behind the current code. When we did our move to 90.1, we wanted to make sure that some people were going to, during this transition period, as people were getting used to it, we made it still available. But when it comes after this code cycle, we're doing the full meal deal, heading to 90.1 as the statewide code in about November 1st is the current proposal, if we can get this for April 1. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Tyler, you need to address some written testimony, is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, Tyler Glaze, policy analyst for the division, excuse me. Yes, Mr. Chair, we received one piece of written testimony from Mr. Jeff Burns. He's an architect with Burns Organic Modern in Portland. That testimony is attached to the board packet. If you don't have that link in there, that board packet is also available on the BCD website under board meetings for today. And you can click through to the link there. But that is the only piece of testimony I believe we received on this, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and you need to address some special voting concerns?
Yes, yes, Mr. Chair, excuse me. Again, Tyler Glaze, policy analyst for the division. Mr. Chair and members of the board, this motion, if there is a motion to approve, which there will need to be on this item, there will need to be 4 board members to vote yes to move it forward that are absolutely required. Those are the members of the Residential and Manufactured Structures Board and the Building Code Structures Board. So all 4 of those members must vote yes to move it forward. And the motions need to have the cost findings as well, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I guess
Chair Kyle.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's Alana Cox with the division. I just wanted to clarify the phase-in period. I think Mark misspoke there that last time on November 1. We're looking at adopting April 1 with a phase-in to October 1. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I guess we're at the point where we need to have a motion on this proposed adoption. Is there anyone that would like to make that motion?
Through the chair, this is Blake Shalide at the Oregon Department of Energy. I'll make a motion to approve the proposal in front of us. With the note, and to kind of address just some of the other comments and discussion that we had earlier around some of the, there's some questions around training. Certainly our agency has been out doing some training on energy code, and we would definitely look forward to doing some more training on this updated code and coordinating with BCD. And NIA in the region has been a great partner on training, and we really see that the transition to ASHRAE 90.1 has been set up really well by BCD over the past couple of years. And Mark and Alana and all their staff have been really clear about what the transition and update to 90.1 is. So we're excited to be here, kind of where we are and what it represents for the goals in meeting our executive orders. I think this one gets us about 45% of the 60% way toward meeting executive order 20-04. So a really good progress with this code, with still a number of cycles to go. So this alignment to 90.1 really represents a good trajectory for the state.
Okay, if I
Sorry,
may
Mr. Chair.
state your motion for you.
Yeah. Again, my motion is to approve the proposal on the table to move to 90.1 version 2019 with the amendments that Mark just went over.
Okay, I believe we're supposed to have some reference to the
Oh,
finding of added cost.
yeah, and the findings, with the finding that the added cost, if any, is necessary to conserve the scarce resources and protect the public health, and whatever the verbatim actual word is that I would need to. I think I got it pretty close.
Okay, very good. All right. I guess I will ask the division if that motion complies with what you were looking for.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I believe that would comply, and also the safety of the occupants as well would need to be included in that.
Okay. Melissa, would you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. From the State Plumbing Board, Travis Argue.
I approve.
From the Mechanical Board, Walter Cottle.
Approved.
From the Residential and Manufactured Structures Board, John K. Miller.
Approved.
From the Building Code Structures Board, Gary Heikkinen.
Approved.
From the Electrical and Elevator Board, Heather Miller.
Aye.
From the State Plumbing Board, Matt Roselle.
Aye.
From the Department of Energy, Blake Schalide.
Approved.
From the Residential and Manufactured Structures Board, Eli Volum.
Approve.
From the Building Code Structures Board, Kale Zuschlag.
Approve.
From the Electrical and Elevator Board, Vice Chair, Acting Chair, Thomas Kyle.
Approved.
Mr. Chair, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, is there any further business under this agenda? All right, in that case, I will declare that the meeting is adjourned at 10:37 a.m. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Kyle. Awesome job today.
Thank you. Good job. Great job.